Oh, and we may, because we got some people on vacation out, we may keep practice to just the group unless we get a lot, if we get a lot more people joining on later, I'll break it out into groups, but we'll just kind of play it by ear with that. Okay. Vamos a empezar. We're going to start. Today, I want to kind of focus on some things with preterito, with preterit. We'll do some practice. We're going to try to inch along with some irregulars and get comfortable with one or two at a time and introduce a couple of new ones. So this little slide set that I had given you with the irregulars is something you may want, although I'm going to keep it up on the share setting here. So the thing to keep in mind with irregular preterit, which is a huge, it's not even a speed bump in Spanish. It's like a whole bunch of speed bumps really close together is what irregular preterit is like, is that we use a particular type of conjugation endings with irregular preterit. They somewhat look like the regular preterit conjugations, but not always. They get rid of the accent marks. So it gets like irregular preterits get their own special kind of group of conjugation endings. And there's always something funky, weird, odd, multiple spelling changes within the stem itself. And that those two things combine to make the irregular preterit a difficult thing and a thing that requires a lot of memorization. So we're going to take a quick review before we start with practice. That all of the blue shows you here are the endings, the conjugation endings we use for regular preterit. And in regular preterit, we divide it into here are regular AR endings, and then here are regular ER-IR endings. The irregular preterit, it will not matter if the verb is AR, ER, IR. What will matter is, oh, I'm telling you, this is an irregular preterit verb. So it being an AR, ER, IR ain't gonna matter. What's gonna matter is, because it's an irregular preterit category type verb, it's going to use these kinds of endings, regardless of whether it's an AR or an ER or an IR. Okay, so we're going to get things like the for yo, but no accent mark, not the that gets the punch, just an by itself. We're going to get imos. It's going to take the imos endings. It's going to take iste for tu, like ER-IR verbs did. It's going to take o, but no accent mark. Okay, so it's kind of like the AR regular preterit, but no accent mark. It's o, like this is o, but it's o with no accent marks. That means we cannot punch that last syllable. The lack of accent marks means that this ending with an o does not get emphasis on the end syllable. The e ending for yo does not get the punch on the last syllable. So taking away that accent mark affects how you pronounce it. Okay, the sound of the vowel itself gets the same sound, but which syllable you stress more will shift. Instead of punching the last syllable, you'll, because it's an e with no accent mark, it'll punch the second to last syllable. The o ending will punch the second to the last syllable. That's just what it's going to do. And then ellos y ustedes gets our yeron ending. So verb having AR, ER, IR doesn't matter for irregular preterites. And you can see that because dar is an AR. Dar is an AR verb, but it's an irregular preterite. So it's going to go into all these weird endings. So we took a look at dar and decir, just because we know they're irregular, and the dar verbs are very, very short and odd. And even dar doesn't follow all those endings that you see in the chart. So dar becomes di or diste or dio or dimos or distes or dieron. And decir gets that thing of the stem truly changing. D-E-C-I-R, we take off the I-R, we usually have D-E-C, but that whole thing is going to change to D-I-J. It's very, very odd. It becomes dije, dijiste, dijo, dijimos, dijistes, and dijeron. It doesn't even use I-E-R-O-N for the ellos form. So you can see there are like just funky, odd things that happen with irregular preterite. They're just odd. Okay. And we had a reminder that we had all these odd things with ir that all have the fu beginnings, right? Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuiste, fueron. And ver actually doesn't feel all that irregular because we take off the ER. We do have the V left. Vi, viste, vio, vimos, viste, vistes, vieron. Okay, so we had all of those, but now we're going to have some prep. And again, because I've got my share screen on, I won't be able to see you raise a hand. So you'll have to kind of chime in. Here are some prompts, and let's see, let me take you off of share. How many people do we have on today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. Would you guys prefer to do this drill all together, or do you want to go into 2 groups, smaller groups? Which would you rather do, since it's a smaller group today? Would you rather stay all together, or stay all together? Okay, I'm seeing people nodding. Okay, a ver. And that way, if you've got a question right away, I'll be right here to answer it. Vamos, let's take a look. Vamos a ver. Okay, prompts to prep. Oh, let's take out the next week because it is next week. Okay. And these are going to be just drilling you, getting used to plugging in the right verb form. And all this page is going to use only forms of dar. So it's only going to be the di, diste, dio, dimos, dieron, all of those, okay? And the subject is underlined. So when you have a combination like this of yo le, remember, you're not conjugating for le. You're conjugating for yo, okay? The reason I said that the subject is underlined is that you got to look at the underlined word to say, I picked the conjugation for that human being, okay? That's the cue for the verb form that we need. So we're going to build a sentence that says, I gave something. You're filling in the verb and filling in the thing. I gave something to my son or daughter, right? The le just reinforces that you're talking about who received something. Okay, I'll give you my example. Yo le di una carta a mi hijo con su sorpresa de cumpleaños. His birthday surprise was in the letter. Yo le di una carta a mi hijo. And I like,
you don't need to say a mi hijo if it's just in conversation and I know you're talking about him, right? It would just be
depende. It depends. It depends. If it's unclear, from the previous part of the conversation, you might include it once to clarify it.
I
If
sort
it's
of have I sort of have a similar question. It feels redundant to say, Lidi, and then at the end of the sentence say, mi hijo.
Amigo, isn't that super redundant to be saying that? That is how everyone reacts to that.
Exactly.
But it is what happens frequently. It does happen frequently. The amigo may be left off. Okay, so in other words, if I were to give you this sentence without the amigo, you would have no clue who I meant by le. Because
Right.
le has no gender, I'm talking about but you would be saying to yourself with no context, I gave him or I gave her. Who is the him or the her? And specifically, him or her, who is that person at all? I mean, so
I just know if I'm thinking about it without your prompt there, I would have just said, yo di un carta
okay.
a mi hijo.
So here is what happens. It does sound redundant. And in fact, it is redundant. And in fact, that is what happens a lot of the time. So here's what's going to happen. If you got the a mi hijo, why do I even bother with the le?
Exactly.
But yes, you do. You will never hear in a normal conversation, you'll almost never hear yo di, I got to think hard how to say this because I never say it. Yo di una carta a mi hijo. No one will omit the le.
Okay.
No one will ever omit the le. Ever. 99.9% of it, that high. No one will omit the word le. It will sound odd to somebody. They're going to skip a beat and think harder. If they hear you say, if a native speaker hears you say, I've got to pause. Yo di una carta a mi hijo. They're going to stop a beat and think because it's not natural for them to omit the word le.
Okay.
Even though it sounds redundant to you, shouldn't
Right.
I keep one or the other? If I'm saying a mi hijo, why do we even bother with the word le? But their reaction is more like it's more natural to have the le and maybe not have the a mi hijo.
Okay.
So why do I have that for you? Because as a prompt with no context at all, perdón. This is what you see on the screen, dump the a mi hijo, is probably more natural because from the previous part of the conversation, you would get it. But because you're getting this prompt out of context, I can't really, for you, exclude the a mi hijo.
Sure.
But in a normal conversation, the a mi hijo may not be there at all. May be there, depending on how much context is in that conversation. Almost no one will omit that word le.
I just need lots of practice at it, I think.
And that's okay. Yes. Does it sound redundant, like you're beating a dead horse? How many times do I have to tell who I'm giving it to? But, yeah, but that happens. Okay, so
that's
Sus
reflexive,
ejemplos.
right? That's reflexive.
No,
You
it is
gave-
not reflexive because it is
Oh.
le, not se. It
Okay.
is lady. I gave him.
Okay.
I gave him or I gave her. Yo le di. So in your answer, because you know the context from the written thing, you can skip the a mi hijo if you wish. You
Sure.
can skip it. I gave it to you because of the context being unclear.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sus ejemplos, your examples.
Yo le di una blusa azul a mi hija.
A mi hija. Okay, bien. Yo le di una blusa. I gave her a blouse. Bueno.
Yo le di un billete por el juego de béisbol. a mi
Okay.
hija.
Bien, bien. Excelente. Okay.
Yo
Yo
le
le
di,
di,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
okay. Yo le di un juego de video nuevo a mi hijo.
Un videojuego. Un videojuego. Vale.
Yo le di un abrazo a mi hija cuando le vi.
Excelente. Un abrazo.
Oh,
Ah, sí, 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 perfecto. And that is exactly what people will say. Okay. Vale, bien. Otro ejemplo.
Yo le di dinero a mi hijo.
Perfecto. Muy bien, muy bien. Bien hecho. Okay.
Wait, I
Vale.
have one question too.
Ujú.
See if I mashed up a little bit of the verbs here. Yo le di un gato a mi hija cuando tenía 10 años. It was a specific time, but
Sí,
when she was 10.
sí, sí. Muy bien. Muy
Okay.
bien. Yo le di un gato a mi hija cuando tenía 10 años, when she was 10. And the tenía cannot be preterite. The
Okay.
tenía shifts into imperfecto. And why is that okay? It is not only okay, it is necessary.
It's a time thing. It's an age thing.
It's an age thing. An age thing in the past, an age thing in the past is going to be imperfecto. It is a description.
Okay.
That piece of it, that age piece of it is description and therefore imperfecto, and it flips into a different tense. But the deep part has got to be preterito because it is an action that happened. Yeah. And
Okay.
it was over with quickly. So yes, see, otherwise it's like was giving. How long were you given?
Oh,
When you
okay.
gave the, sometimes the nature of that action of the verb is going to really kind of determine, well, it's going to be that. Okay. So let's look at the difference. Usually in most conversations, high percentage, super high percentage, when you gave something to somebody, it's usually preterito. The nature of that action, dar, to give, means it's something that happened and it's kind of done quickly, right?
Right.
In the small percentage of conversations where dar might use imperfecto, it would have to be a repeated action. And you didn't give that cat 3 or 4 or
No.
5 times over. But when might you? Okay, if you had a regular meetup with your kid, if you regularly went to the zoo, and every time you went to the zoo, you bought them an ice cream cone, you gave them an ice cream cone, then it would have been a repeated action that happened every single time you went. So somebody could say, and by the way, if they choose to use imperfecto when they tell you this, they're signaling to you that they did this many, many times. So many times that they can't count up and give you a number and peg it on. Just a lot. The vague a lot. So it would be something like, yo le daba un helado a mi hijo cuando íbamos al zoológico. I used to give an ice cream cone to him or to her when we used to go. But they would be telling you, look, I did it, I don't know, a lot, that many times, over and over again. But you know, if it's a gift given on a specific date, that's one and done. Yeah. So the context is really the king. And most of the time when you say you gave something, it's not going to be a repeated action. Usually it's going to be a one and done event. Okay. Bien. Ok, vale. Bueno, el segundo ejemplo. Mi esposo, mi esposo, oh, es un regalo muy, muy raro. It's a really weird gift. Mi esposo me dio, the few of you who know my husband, you would understand this. Mi esposo me dio herramientas, tools, herramientas para mi cumpleaños. Mi esposo es una persona muy práctica. He's a very practical person. Mi esposo me dio herramientas para mi cumpleaños. So I don't exert myself. That's my gift. Okay. Otros ejemplos.
Mi esposo me di ratón electrónico para mi cumpleaños.
Okay. Me dio, gave me. Okay. And it's got to be mi esposo dio, right?
Dio.
Not di, but dio.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So now this is good that I heard this. So now look, this is a
Okay.
very natural thing. When you've got that me pronoun, look at the first one, we had a le, right?
Yeah.
But who was doing the giving? Yo. Yo le di, yo le di, yo le di, but mi esposo me dio.
Yep.
Me is in front of the verb, but me has no connection to the form the verb takes. Me does not determine the form of that verb. It is not saying put it in yo, right? Otherwise, it means I gave myself. Well, sometimes we say I gave myself a treat. You know, we might, but then, yeah, that'll be another thing. Mi esposo me dio. Mi esposo me dio. Okay. Vale. Algo electrónico, something electronic. Okay. ¿Quién más? Who else?
No,
Well,
mi
when-
es-
when-
pasado.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
but Marcos, let's take you next.
Okay, well, when you're too old to need anything, mi esposa me dio un beso para mi cumpleaños.
Okay. Vale, muy bien, muy bien. Fantástico. Diana.
Mi esposo me dio muchos regalos para mi cumpleaños.
Aún mejor, even better. Okay. Excelente. ¿Alguien más?
What was the thing there?
Muchos regalos.
Lots of gifts.
Mi esposo me dio una docena rosas para mi cumpleaños.
Una docena de rosas.
Oh,
Qué elegante, qué elegante. Me gusta mucho. Bueno, algo más.
Mi esposo me dio un masaje para mi cumpleaños.
oh.
¡Qué sorpresa! Fantástico. Vale, bueno, algo más.
El año pasado, mi esposo me dio una cartera bonita para mi cumpleaños.
Excelente, sí. Exacto. Bueno, otro
Is it a
ejemplo.
card or a purse?
Purse.
Oh, a purse. Very
Bien, sí. Ok, algo más. Anything else? Entonces, número tres. Nosotros no le, and now you're going to have to fill in a person at the tail end. But it's a we. We're conjugating it for we, nosotros. Nosotros no le dimos dinero a nuestro primo. Nosotros no le dimos dinero a nuestro primo or cousin. Hay algo con nuestro primo. Nuestro primo muchas veces quiere dinero y es larga historia. He's a long story. Okay. No le dimos. And usually in most cases, this nosotros is what people would leave off. But again, I can't assume that when you're seeing these written, right? I have to have, so really how I would normally say this to leave the nosotros off, but that you needed that prompt so that you know how to conjugate it. No le dimos dinero a nuestro primo. Okay, vale. Ustedes, you guys.
Nosotros no le dimos dinero a un político.
Interesante. Bien. Bueno, ¿algo más?
Nosotros no le dimos dinero a mi hija.
Okay, bien. Okay, dimos, as long as you make sure you're doing your dimos. Okay, ¿algo más?
No le dimos dinero a mi sobrina.
Bien. Okay.
How
Vale.
about when the police called and asked for money the other day? You know, whatever, they're going to carnival or whatever. So I said, no les dimos dinero. But then I got confused. Is it al policia? And if it's just the police, is it le or les?
If sí. Okay. El policía would be one policeman. La policía could be a policewoman, or more frequently, la policía talks about the police force as a whole.
Okay, so just
La
le.
policía will talk about the whole group as an organization.
But so if I did use a plural though, would it be les? Les?
Sí, es posible.
Okay.
Es
But
posible.
not needed here.
But really here, it's not needed here because policía is taken as police force, the whole group of them. And that's
Good.
not something I would expect you to know. No le dimos dinero a la policía.
Okay.
O no le dimos dinero a la organización de la policía. Okay.
Sure.
Bien. Fantástico. Ok. Y 4. Cuando me casé, when I got married. Mis padres, my parents gave something to me. Cuando me casé, mis padres me dieron muebles. Furniture. Cuando me casé, mis padres me dieron muebles. Bien. Sus ejemplos. Your example.
Bendiciones. Sus bendiciones.
Bendiciones. Sí, blessings. Me dieron sus bendiciones.
Yes.
Sí, excelente. Bendiciones is blessings. Their goodwill, their wishes for a happy future, their approval. Sí, bendiciones.
Sí.
Perfecto. Ok, algo más.
Cuando me casé, mis padres nos dieron una grande fiesta.
Sí, nos dieron una fiesta muy grande, una gran fiesta, gran was shortened, yeah? Una
Okay,
gran
gran.
fiesta if you put it in front, but una fiesta grande if you put it behind. Yeah,
Okay.
Gran gets the chop if you put it in
Right.
front. It's one of those odd few description words that gets the chop, the shortening. Una gran fiesta, a huge party. Perfecto. Vale. Algo más.
Cuando me casé, mis padres me dieron una cama para mi apartamento.
Perfecto. Sí.
Oh,
Excelente. Algo más.
Cuando me casé, mis padres me dieron dinero.
Bien, muy común. Sí, una costumbre muy común. Vale, bueno, hay otra idea.
Cuando me casé, mis padres me dieron un viaje a Inglaterra con mi esposo.
Para la luna de miel, for honeymoon.
Sí,
Para la luna de miel. Sí, y se dice honeymoon como la luna de
Luna de
miel.
miel.
La luna de miel is moon of honey. Yeah, la luna de miel. That is something that does get.
wait, what did you
translated.
say before that, Pat?
oh, in terms of, oops, let me get
Like,
that.
for Luna de Miel, before that, what is that?
Oh,
What did you say before that?
I said, me
Yeah.
dieron un viaje a Inglaterra con mi esposo.
Oh, okay.
Un viaje,
Got
a trip,
got it.
a
I
voyage, a
didn't
trip.
catch that. Okay.
Sí,
Fun.
okay.
It was.
So, qué divertido, ¿no? So,
Sí.
one thing I want you guys to notice, and it makes it difficult because a lot of times we connect whatever word is next to the verb with, oh, I conjugate it for this. And with this verb, it won't necessarily be the case because you'll almost never hear this verb used, dar, this specific word, dar. You'll almost always hear it like this. Le di, le dimos. You're almost always going to hear it paired up with a pronoun. This verb dar is almost always paired up with some kind of pronoun. Les di, in a question, me diste, did you give me, that. Bien, dar is almost always paired up with one of these pronouns. And that is because of the nature of what that verb conveys, that something's being given. We almost always have a pronoun in front of it that tells you who's receiving that action of dar, who receives it. Who receives it comes in front of, in this case, diste, me diste. Hey, did you give me that? Les di, I gave them, right? Le dimos, we gave him or we gave her. Le di, I gave him or I gave her. Okay, dar is almost always going to pair up with what they call an indirect object pronoun. So you'll always have a me or a te or a le or a les or a nos paired up in front of that form of dar. Almost always, because it's very unnatural to them to not cue in, well, oh, who gets that item? Who gets it? Okay, the verb is not conjugated for who gets it, right? The verb is conjugated for who is doing the giving, right? But that little pronoun that comes in front of the verb signals who is receiving the action of dar. So you'll almost never in isolation hear just di or just dimos or just diste. it's always going to be paired up with a pronoun that tells you who's on the receiving end. That's just the nature of that verb. Okay. Bien.
Carolyn, before
Sí.
we jump to the next one,
Sí, sí.
and I'm going to ask a question that maybe you could put on an agenda for, not now, but or maybe even in the Monday class. But you mentioned, and we just went through an example there where there was an adjective or two that came before the noun.
Oh, la
And-
gran
And
fiesta.
that would be some kind of an exception to the rule that most of the adjectives come after the noun. Could you maybe take 10 minutes out of one session and kind of help us with what are the ones that are like that?
Sí, sí, sí. Claro, sí. Because it's a small category. There are certain descriptions. If you're not following what Mark is asking about, there are certain description words, that means adjectives, certain description words that get truncated. They get kind of chopped. The ending gets chopped off. They have a shortened form. It's a pretty small number of words. Yeah, we'll handle that. We'll fit that into next week, Monday, because that's a topic has nothing to do with conjugation.
Right.
It's all, yeah, but there are certain words that do that, meaning that, you're used to, oh, I look for an ending that tells you masculine or feminine, singular or plural. And some words kind of get shortened off where that ending you expect to hear isn't there anymore. Yeah, we'll talk about that next week, la semana que viene, next Monday. It's a good drill. Es buena práctica. Gracias. Okay. Vamos a practicar con decir. We're going to practice with decir. And again, our purpose in doing this is just to repeat examples, say our own examples, and listen to other people's examples so we get that imprint of what happens with decir. So now we're changing up a little bit. We're going to be looking at this set of words. Decir is longer than dar. Decir still has a funky, weird thing that happens with the front part of the DEC of decir, right? DIJ is what it switches to. There is no J in decir. There is no that DEC. That looks all wrong, but it's what happens. Dije, dijiste, dijo, dijimos, dijiste, dijeron. Okay. A ver, we're going to move on to practicing just decir forms. Okay. And again, the underlined part tells you what I need to do with the verb, the person for whom I am conjugating that verb. And in the beginning, this first one, el primer ejemplo, the first example, is going to tell us, I didn't tell him or her anything. In other words, I didn't say anything to someone. Okay. Por ejemplo, mi ejemplo es, yo no le dije nada a mi compañera de trabajo, to my workmate. Yo no le dije nada, no le dije, I didn't tell her. No le dije nada a mi compañera de trabajo, to my work colleague. I didn't tell her anything. Okay. Otro ejemplo.
Yo no le dije nada a mi vecino.
Bien. Yo no le dije nada a mi vecino. And again, like decir, or like dar, decir will often include this little le pronoun. It is more usual than not to have that little pronoun because I'm saying something to somebody. So it is odd to not have me, te, le, les, nos. It's odd to omit that little pronoun. It is more usual to include that little pronoun. Okay, bien. Otro ejemplo. Vecino colega, somebody else?
No le
yo no le dije nada a mi esposo.
Okay, bien. Vale. Algo más, something else.
No le dije nada a una persona muy irrespetuosa.
Ah, ok. Bien,
Mm.
vale. Bueno, ¿otra idea?
Yo no le dije nada a mi hijo cuando me hace enojar.
Oh, when he makes you mad. Oh, bien, 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 bien. Cuando me enoja, when he makes me mad. I'm gonna fill that in.
Cuando me
Like
enoja.
when he made me mad.
Yeah,
Okay.
enojar or enoja?
Just enojar.
Enojar,
With
okay.
cuando me enojó, when he made me mad, he
Okay.
angered me. Cuando
Okay.
me enojó, when he got me mad. Because he did the angering, he did something. Sí, entiendo. Boy, I understand that one.
All right.
Cuando me enojó, when
We
he
all
got,
wrote that down in our notes.
when he got me
That's
mad.
important, Nora.
Yeah.
Eso. Sí. Exacto. Okay. Vale. We're going to switch gears a little bit. Instead of yo, we're going to talk about something my boss said. My boss told me that, boop, 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 boo. Okay. Por ejemplo, mi jefe me dijo que, mi jefe me dijo que el presupuesto había cambiado. My boss told me that the budget had changed. Por ejemplo, I know that's kind of, ¿sí? Bien.
Mi jefe me dijo que la oficina está cerrado.
Bien, sí.
Mm.
Offices closed. Bien.
Mi jefe me dijo que puedo trabajar de mi casa.
Okay. Bien.
Mi jefe me dijo que la reunión había terminado.
Bien. The meeting had ended. Sí, exacto. Oh, you can even make it something short. If what you mean is, oh, my boss told me no. Sometimes we say, yeah, somebody told me no. Or somebody told me, yeah. Okay. So in other words, when we're saying somebody denied something or approved something, it could even be as short as this. Mi jefe me dijo que no. Mi jefe me dijo que no. My boss told me no.
Mi jefe me dijo que yo soy el mejor empleado.
Okay. Yeah. Sí. Okay. For my boss told me yes. Mi jefe me dijo que sí. Me dijo que sí. He told me yeah. So it can even be as short as that. Okay. Perfecto. Okay.
Mi jefe me dijo que él me quiere trabajar hasta las 5.
Que quiere que yo trabaje hasta las 5. Mi jefe me dijo que quiere, he wants, que yo trabaje. He wants that I should work.
So
Él quiere que yo trabaje.
that I work.
Sí. Quiere que yo trabaje hasta las 5. He wants me to work till 5. That is a tricky thing. He wants that I should do something. And we still don't know if I'm going to do that something or no. So instead of it being trabajo like you think it should be, it becomes trabaje.
What tense is that then?
That is subjunctive.
Subjunctive. Okay.
When I want somebody else to do something, the fact that I want it is factual. Yeah.
Okay.
I want him to work. I want him to pay. I want him to leave. I want him to come at a certain time. Okay, that's a fact. But I want that he does that. I don't know if that other action is going to happen or not. I want it to, but that activity that I want, it isn't actually happening yet. And because it's part of the world that is not for sure, not really happening yet, it's not a part of what is really going on. It goes into something that they call subjunctive.
Okay.
We have a very poor or non-existent translation of subjunctive in English. And sometimes what we do in English is we just kick it into infinitive. He wants me to work. He wants me to work, and we kick it into infinitive. But in Spanish, they cannot kick that into infinitive because the working part isn't really part of what is happening in real time. And because it is uncertain, it goes into what they term subjunctive. It actually gets a conjugation, but it gets an odd conjugation. That's a kind of a, wow, it's a big can of worms.
Okay.
But it is different. Take a look at when Juanita had this thing of, yo no le dije nada a mi hijo cuando me enojó. The fact that he actually got me mad, that actually happened.
Okay.
So that stays in real tense. Yeah. The real world tense of present or past. But he wants me to work till 5. Ain't getting up to 5 o'clock yet. Oh yeah. All that is in la land of not really happening yet. And we don't know if I will work to 5 or not. I know that sounds weird, but that is what happens.
And you have to say it, you have to translate it from the sense of he wants that I work.
Yes.
He
What it
wants that
really,
I
really
work.
translated, he wants that I might do this. He wants that I might work. He wants that I might pay. He wants that I might walk into the office early. He wants that I help this customer. Nobody helping the customer yet. Yeah, that isn't really happening yet. Okay. So yeah.
what is the phrase that you're supposed to say in this case? So you said that mi jefe me dijo
mi jefe me dijo
que él quiere
que él quiere que yo trabaje.
Que yo trabaje, okay.
Hasta las 5.
Okay.
My boss said that he wants that I should work until 5. And everything was, but look at what we flipped. We flipped from boss said past to he wants right now that I should work until 5. It's in the future. And I don't know what's happening with that future piece yet, because that is not a part of what is really happening yet. And we don't know if I will work till 5 or not yet. Yeah, it's kind of a funky thing. Okay. Vale, let's get a nosotros.
I just had a question. I'm sorry, on the last one. I had mi jefe me dijo ir de vacaciones. And I meant to say my boss told me to go on vacation. But do I need the K because it's to go?
Sí. Mi jefe me dijo que yo debe tomar que yo there are different things you can do. Que debo tomar vacaciones, that I should take vacation. Que mi jefe me dijo que yo tome vacaciones. Que yo vaya de vacaciones. It might go into subjunctive. It might.
I just say ir to go?
No, because that isn't telling who's going.
Okay.
Ah, in English, we can do that. He told me to go on vacation. Mi
Okay.
jefe me dijo que, and actually, mi jefe que dijo que fuera, it's even going to go into past subjunctive there. So yeah, it's going to get a little bit convoluted.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, it'll take kind of too long to explain.
Okay.
Mi jefe que dijo que fuera de vacaciones, que tomara unas vacaciones. Yeah. Okay. And we'll sadly have to let that sit for a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Said can lead into a subjunctive kind of thing. Okay. So how do you know that is going to get you in trouble? If my boss said that I should take a vacation and that vacation has not yet happened. It's the
Okay.
not yet happened thing that gets us into trouble. That we'll get into that thing we call subjunctive, and I don't expect you to know that. Okay, so right now we're just going to practice the dije and dijiste and dijo and dijimos. Bien. Vale, perfecto. Vamos a practicar la forma para nosotros. ¿Cuál es la forma de decir para nosotros?
Dijimos.
Dijimos, bien. Nosotros dijimos la verdad a...
mis padres.
Okay, and then we'll just change the le to les. Les dijimos la verdad a nuestros padres. Bien.
Oh, okay.
Nosotros le dijimos la verdad
A la familia.
Bien, sí, okay, and you're just filling in a person, but le dijimos, we told him or we told her, le dijimos. If you use padres at the end, then les dijimos, bien? So one thing you should be noticing is that, again, much like dar, because of the nature of this verb, you are usually going to hear le dije, right? And I told him, right? Les dije, I told them. Te dije, I told you. This verb decir in preterito is usually in a normal conversation going to be paired up with me, te, nos, le, or les, because you said something to somebody, and the to somebody has to be the me, te, le, les, or nos, right? That verb, by the nature of what it means, is I told. I told doesn't happen in a vacuum. I told happens to somebody that you were yakking at, right? So we'll almost always hear somebody pairing up dije or dijiste or dijo with a little pronoun in front. And that little pronoun tells who was on the receiving end of your having said something. Okay. Bien. Okay. Cuando me jubilé, when I retired. Cuando me jubilé. Mis compañeros de trabajo. What am I going to do with that verb?
Dijeron.
Me dieron, or me dijeron. Me dijeron. Me dijeron adiós. Me dijeron
Felicidades.
Felicidades. Me dijeron felicidades. They told me congrats.
Buena suerte.
Buena suerte. Me dijeron buena suerte. Sí, perfecto. Me dijeron hasta la vista.
Me dijeron tomar un gran viaje.
Que tomara gran viaje, that take a good trip, yeah,
Viaje,
something like
yeah.
that. Sí, okay. Me dijeron, me dijeron, me dijeron. They told me. Me dijeron, right? And the me doesn't match up with the form of dijeron. The me says that I was on the receiving end. And the dijeron is a bunch of them. They said to me. Me dijeron. Okay. Okay. Vale. Bien. So, dar, the di, diste, dio, dimos, dieron, and decir. Dije, dijiste, dijo, dijimos, dijeron, right? Often get paired up with a little pronoun. And now, ir, we're going to go back to ir so we get used to some practice with ir. Wow, we're running about, well, you know, this takes a while. Ir, okay. This is in that FU starting with the stem starts off with the FU, fu, like fooey. All right, fui. I didn't go to some place. Yo no fui al parque ayer. Yo no fui al parque ayer.
Yo no fui a Arizona cuando hace calor.
Ah, bien, sí. Cuando hacía calor, no fui a Arizona, bien.
Yo no fui a muchos conciertos.
Yo no fui a muchos conciertos, bien. Vale, otra idea.
Yo no fui a Costa Rica con mi esposo.
¡Oh! ¡Qué lástima! What a shame! Guy, qué lástima. Bien. And now notice these flow a little faster. You're not thinking about a little pronoun, are you?
Mhm.
Because when you go, yeah. Only the person involved in the going is what we conjugate for. Okay. Yo no fui. Otra idea. Yo no fui.
Yo no fui al supermercado hoy.
Ok, bien, fantástico. Ok, el segundo ejemplo, mi mejor amigo. Mi mejor amigo fue a Inglaterra. Mi mejor amigo fue a Inglaterra. Bien, ok, otro ejemplo.
Mi mejor amigo fue a Maui conmigo.
Fue a Maui.
Oh.
Fue a Maui. Ok, bien. ¿Algo más? Ok, vale. For nosotros, I want you to use irse.
Oh,
Make it we left. We left a place. Por ejemplo, sí, bien.
Nosotros fuimos de Jakarta.
Okay, nos fuimos de Jakarta. We left, and now it's going to mean left instead of just went. Nos fuimos de Jakarta. Bien. Nos fuimos. If I were a snowbird and I were like someplace back in the Midwest, nos fuimos de Arizona. We left Arizona. Nos fuimos de Arizona. Bien.
Nos fuimos de Chicago cuando compramos una casa en Downers Grove.
Bien. Exacto. Okay. Excelente. What are we going to do for mis mejores amigos with ir? After their wedding, después de su boda, mis mejores amigos
Fueron
fueron a
Hawaii
club
para su
nocturno.
luna de miel.
fueron a Hawaii, fueron a Colorado, fueron a California,
A la fiesta.
fueron a la fiesta, exacto, okay? So, fui, to talk about one person, fue, to talk about we, and with irse, nos fuimos, to talk about mejores amigos, fueron, ¿ok? Un ejemplo más. Ver. We're going to squeeze this in just a little bit. 5 minutos. And again, it's short because I am not really normally adding on an extra pronoun. I mean, I could for a direct object, but I don't need to. I saw something. She saw something. We're going to be mentioning the thing that we saw. Okay. Ayer yo vi un correcaminos. I saw a roadrunner yesterday. And I don't need the If I needed a human being, I would need an yo vi un correcaminos. I saw a roadrunner. But I needed a little if I say a human being. Vi a mi vecina. Vi a mi vecina. Bien. Otro ejemplo. Another example there for vi, I saw.
Ayer yo vi a un hombre en un Tesla.
Vi a un hombre en un Tesla. I saw a man in a Tesla. Bien.
Ayer yo vi 3 coyotes.
Bien. Fantástico. Ok. ¿Algo más?
Ayer yo vi a mi doctor.
Vi a mi doctor. I saw my doctor. Bien. Perfecto. Ok. Pero vi a mi doctor, but if it's just coyote, vi un coyote. Bien, right? Unless the animal is a pet of yours. And coyote es probable que no. Correcaminos es probable que no es mascota. Okay.
Es que vieja amiga. Ayer yo vi a vieja amiga.
Bien,
old
perfecta. Sí. Vi a mi vieja amiga. I saw my old friend. Vieja amiga, perfecto. Vieja amiga, my old friend, my former friend, my friend of a long time. Eso es. Perfecto. Ok. El segundo ejemplo. Mi esposo o mi esposa, ¿sí? Saw something. Cuando fue al parque. Cuando fue. Mi esposo vio. Mi esposo vio un venado cuando fue al parque. My husband saw a deer when he went to the park. Mi esposo fue un venado cuando fue al parque.
Mi esposo vio un, I don't know what is in Spanish, un bobcat. Cuando
Sí, bobcat. ¿Cómo se dice? No sé exactamente, bobcat. Un gato
Lince.
salvaje. I've got to look up a bobcat.
Bobgato.
Ay,
Gato
sí,
de
no
Bob.
sé. Es probable que haya algún término para bobcat. No lo conozco, ¿verdad? No es exactamente coyote, no. Pero sí entiendo. Ok. Bien. Vale. And I'm going to shorten this up a little bit because we're kind of getting past on time. Last week we saw un ejemplo suyo, an example of yours from you guys. La semana pasada
Nosotros vimos Heartland en la tele.
vimos Heartland en la tele.
La
Nosotros-
semana pasada. Go.
Go ahead.
La semana pasada nosotros vimos la semana pasada esta noche con John Oliver.
Con John Oliver. Bien, sí. Ok. Marcos, Mark.
La semana pasada nosotros vimos el primer año de Killing Eve.
Bien. Vale, bueno. Muy bien. Ok. Y por fin. Este fin de semana, this weekend, este fin de semana, mis vecinos, en el
Vieron.
barrio, in the neighborhood.
Dieron paquete de jabalinas en el barrio.
vieron a jabelinas, una familia de jabelinas, sí, en el barrio. Ooh, I've got an interesting thing about terms for groups of animals. I'll have to show you guys a later date. Bien, sí. Un grupo de jabelinas, sí. Vieron un grupo de javelina, but we wouldn't use an because they're not pets. Yeah. If you saw your neighbor's pet, then you might use an but otherwise animals, we don't use an
So you say una familia de
una
jabalina?
familia, un grupo de javelina, una familia de javelina, because they always travel in a family group, right? Sí,
Yes.
eso es, sí, sí.
So
Bueno,
you cannot say a pack of
paquete
No.
wouldn't make sense. No, there are some specific pack words. I'm going to go back. I'm
It's
going to
like
find a
wolf.
video on that for
Yeah,
you.
okay.
I don't know that it will address javelina, but I'll see if I can find that for you. I'm not sure if they've got a special word, but they might. Es posible. No sé. I don't know. Okay. Vale. Bien. I'm going to take that off the share for a minute. What I am going to give you to start to work on next week is 2 new verbs for preterito that are very irregular, and they're going to be these 2 because I don't want to overload you with like a gob of them. We're going to take 2 new ones, and I'm going to send you a whole set of slides. This will have prompts like this previous one did, but the 2 verbs you're going to work on are going to be hacer and venir. And you're going to notice there's going to be a funky I thing that pops up as a recurring theme. So I'm just going to show you what's going to happen. Bien, see, and actually I need to put these. Okay, here's what happens. Woo, boom, 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 boom. So the pink items at the top are the endings, and those are going to follow the endings we generally plug in for irregular preterit. Okay. Iste, o, imos, istes, hicieron, no accent marks. But the stem thing will be weird. Hacer, H-A-C, will change into H-I-C. Ooh, except there's going to be one that doesn't. And then venir is going to turn into B-I-N, bin. So the stem change will be is and bin. And what you'll see on the next slide is going to be what happens. And even within here, the HIC is going to deviate and do a funky, weird thing. You begin to see why.
Yeah.
But you'll read why. And if you read why and then say, I still don't get why, it becomes a Z. We'll talk about that next week. But these 2, I think I'll send you some little videos that just talk about hacer in particular, because, and this one is particularly helpful because a lot of times people will just throw out the idea of ¿qué hiciste? What did you do? What did you do? And so it is super important to know that hacer is considered irregular in preterito. It will do weird things. And venir also falls into the weird category, but is slightly less weird. Let us just say. Okay, bueno, sí, eso es. Do you want a little storytelling video with past as well?
Sure.
That
Sure.
flip-flops? Okay, and I'll send you a little storytelling video. There is one about alebrijes, Diana.
Oh,
I've been waiting to give this one
Excelente.
to you. Yeah. There's a brand new one that came out, I think, a week and a half ago on alebrijes, and it's going to tell you an interesting story using both imperfecto and preterito to talk about alebrijes, and it gives you the Spanish subtitles and the English below. Yay. Okay, so you'll be all set. Okay, vale, perfecto, sí.
Sí.
Okay, so 2 new verbs, 1 new story, y eso es, and that's it. And I've got,
That's a lot.
yay. And we'll do some shortened things for Monday and add that into a little 5-minute, because that's all we'll need is 5 minutes of that. Okay, bien?
Yeah. Bien, bien.
Bueno, que tengan buen fin de. Have a good weekend. I'm going to call
Marilyn,
it. early.
Marilyn?
Sí.
It's okay if you have like somewhere to go, but we're on till 11:30.
Oh my God. Wow, my watch is saying 11:10, 11:11. Are my clocks off? Okay.
No, it is 11:11, but aren't we scheduled
Oh
till
wait, no,
11:30?
we do go to 11:30. Oh, perdón, sorry. Okay, so I can do the okay.
I was thinking the
Gracias,
same
thank you.
thing.
I get messed up between finishing at 11 and finishing. Gracias, thank you, Marcos. Okay, I can do the longer intro. Yay. Okay, so yeah.
I'm not
Boom,
trying
boom,
to
boom, boom.
keep you
No,
longer
no.
than you need to.
You are right. You are right. Okay, so let's take a look at actually this is good
Only
because-
Marcos speaks up.
Gracias, Marcos. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much because I forget my ending time. I need to put one of the, I need to get one of those Post-its and like stick it right there so I can remember. I don't know why I have such a hard time with that for this Wednesday thing, but I do because the time is slightly different. Okay. This is good because it lets me preview what happens with this and why it's important. Okay. Vamos a ver. Let's take a look at hacer and what hacer does. Hacer gets a funky change with its stem, is. So it becomes hice. And now remember, you know what? Actually, I need to modify this just a bit.
We can't see it either.
Oh, perdón. See, I need somebody to keep track of me because otherwise I can't get my act together. I'm going to blame this on having ridden 11 miles this morning already. Oh, yeah. I'm going to modify this just a touch more because actually hacer is one of those verbs that has like, it's a double-edged thing. It has two meanings. Hacer both means to make and to do. Okay. And you know whether it is being used to say make or do according to the context. So in the past, that means it's going to mean did, I did, she did, he did something, or made, I did, you made, or I made, you made, they made, we made something. And in English, boy, we got like no variation in the conjugation. It's always did, or it's always made. Okay. And notice in English, this is really odd. English is very odd. English, we don't add just ed and say, oh, you doed that, he doed something. Look how weird English is. English changes, it does not add an ed like walked, talked. It doesn't even do that. It does this, did. And again, we don't say maked. I maked a cake for you. No, it becomes made. So, wow, we got all kinds of weird irregulars in English. Truly odd stuff. Truly odd stuff. Yeah. So we can't even use that ed rule in English. Our English is very irregular. Okay. And you don't say somebody come to the party, they came to the party. So our English is super odd, even for this. Okay, so if we stick with the is stem, it becomes yo hice, I did or I made. Tú hiciste, you did or you made. Oh, él hizo, ella hizo, usted hizo, he made, he did, she made, she did, you made, you did. Okay, we'll get back to our Z in a minute. Hicimos, bien. Hicisteis, we just take an is and added to the hiciste. hicisteis, okay, but you're not going to need to use that one. And hicieron, hicieron. Okay, so the HAC turns into HIC, and I appears magically out of nowhere. Okay, so hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicistes, hicieron. You'll notice this is pronounced hizo with a s, an S sound, like hice has an S sound. Yeah, bien. But wait a minute, why did that change to Z? Why is hizo? ¿Por qué hizo con Z? Why is it hizo with a Z? If I were to keep the HIC in hizo, if I kept the HIC, I would get this thing. ¿Cómo se pronunciaría? How? Oh, if I were to spell it HICO, I could not pronounce it hizo. I would have to pronounce that
Equal.
Ico, because CO is always ko. It's a phonetic thing. So the reason this word hizo gets yet another funky, weird spelling change is that I cannot have HICO and preserve that phonetic sound of hizo, because CO is ko. So I have to use a letter that will get me back to the S sound. And the only letter I can do that with is a zeta, a Z. Okay. I'm going to complicate this just a little more to let you know that in Spanish, in Castilian Spanish, this will not sound like hice, it'll be hice. This will not be hiciste, it'll be hiciste. This will not be hizo, it'll be pronounced hizo. It's what they do, okay? That CE or Z gets the thing, yeah? But of course, here in Latin America, it'll sound like an S. Hice, hiciste, hizo. Hicimos, hicistes, hicieron, okay? Let's look at venir, which is a little more consistent, so it's easier. Vine, I came to a place. Yeah. Viniste, you came to a place. Vino, which looks just like the word for wine, it's spelled the same as the word for wine. El vino is wine, a thing, but vino as a verb in context is he came or she came, or the formal you, usted, came. Vinimos, vinisteis, and our tail end plural vinieron. Ellos vinieron, ellas vinieron, ustedes vinieron. Okay. Venir is a little more consistent. I don't have this weird spelling change here, but I'm grouping these together because they do get that letter I, which doesn't appear in the stem. It just is what is used in preterito. Bien, you're going to get some prompts, okay, to work on. I want you to notice one special thing about hacer. Hacer, when we use it in the past, okay, well, in English, often when you answer the question, what did somebody do? We use a completely different verb. Yeah. If I ask you, what did you do at 8 o'clock? Oh, you never answer, I did ride my bike. You'll say, I rode my bike. Right? What did you do at 8 o'clock? I rode my bike. I went to the store. I bought groceries. I called a friend. I watched a little bit of news, but we insert a completely different verb, right? What did you do? The do goes away. Yeah. And you just plug in a completely different verb that is more specific than do, right? So that same thing will happen in Spanish, right? Sometimes you'll keep the hacer. So certain certain phrases will keep that verb hacer, like hacer un viaje, take a trip. I know hacer doesn't mean take, but the expression take a trip uses hacer un viaje. So in a case like that, hacer will stay there. You won't boot it out. You know, you'll keep hacer. In a case like hacer mi tarea, doing my homework, that's a phrase that just, you'll keep hacer. For a phrase like hacer la comida, making food, you might keep that. For a phrase like hacer la cama, make the bed, meaning you tidy it up and straighten it up, the covers, you may keep the verb hacer for certain expressions that normally use the verb hacer, right? But in other situations, when you use hacer or you hear hacer being asked as a question, like, ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? Somebody will plug in, not hacer in the past, they'll plug in a wholly different verb, like, ¿Qué hiciste? Ah, comí un buen desayuno. I had a really good breakfast. I ate a really good breakfast. Ate, comer, has nothing to do with hiciste. Do you see where I'm going with here? Yeah. So often that question, ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? Hacer gets booted out of the answer entirely. Much of the time. ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? Ah, vi mis correos electrónicos. I saw my emails. ¿Qué hiciste? Caminé en el parque. Ah, I walked in the park. ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? Ah, fui al mercado. I went to the market. So quite often with that question conversationally, ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? Somebody calls you or they ask you face to face. Hacer will go away in the answer because I'm plugging in a completely different verb. Bien? You get the idea from that? See? Bien? Okay. So what you do with that verb, it will kind of flip-flop around a little bit, right? One of the things you'll be working on is, you know, this idea. How often do we ask, what did your neighbor do? What did your grandkids do? Right? You'll be plugging in that. And hacer is the word that we use to ask those ideas. So you'll be working on building these questions. What did you do yesterday? What did you guys do this weekend? What did your partner do? What did you and your family do? Or just saying to somebody, hey, listen, or maybe the idea of, hey, I didn't do anything. So I'm going to want you to work on just how do you ask these questions? And these questions will use hacer, right? Bien. So that'll be part of it. And then we'll want you to prep for some practice on answering these questions, which somebody will ask using hacer, but yeah, the question will keep these, right? These are phrases that naturally use hacer anyway. You will not plug in a different verb. They're expressions that just always use hacer. Use hacer, do use hacer, okay? And then you'll have other expressions where you have to plug in a new verb that is not hacer. Does that make sense? Yeah. We want you to be able to use a question using hacer, saying, what did so-and-so do? We want you to be able to use expressions that naturally do use hacer. And we want you to be able to answer questions that plug in a totally different question. Even though hacer is in the question, you'll plug in a totally different and non-related verb to answer the question. Does that make sense?
Sí.
Bien.
Question.
Sí, Marcos.
So from the quick view here, the one that kind of I'm trying to understand a little bit more is the hacer un viaje versus the verb viajar, using the verb. I took a trip versus I traveled.
Okay, bien. So, sí, es buena pregunta. That's a good question. Okay. Voy a mostrarles. I'm going to show you the answer to that because it is easy to show. Oh, if it'll show me my screen. Sí, entonces sí es fácil. Okay, bien, vale. Can you see my blank screen here? Sí?
Yeah.
Bien, okay. Vale. All right. So the difference between this is just going to be that hacer un viaje translates as taking a trip. Yeah. To take a trip, right? And viajar is to travel. Do those convey the same idea? Pretty close. Okay. Although I would say travel might relate more to vacation. Well, I don't know. Nah, maybe not. People travel for work. Yeah. So the difference is that hacer in the first expression, if you're using a past, we'll have to use this verb. Hice un viaje al Canadá, por ejemplo. I took a trip to Canada. You might say I made a trip to Canada. I took a trip to Canada. Hice un viaje a Canadá. But if I use this verb viajar, viajar es muy normal, muy regular. Viajar falls into the regular verb category all the time. Viajar is a verb that is always regular, no matter what the tense is. So viajar, I'll use the regular yo form, a regular preterit conjugation. Viajé a Canadá. What's the difference? Hice un viaje a Canadá means I took a trip to Canada. Viajé a Canadá means I traveled to Canada. Is there a lot of difference? In meaning, not so much. In the form, there is a difference only because this happens to use an irregular verb. This happens to use a perfectly regular verb that follows the regular preterite conjugations.
Both
Yeah.
are good. Both are good.
You can use either.
Yeah.
Yeah, either one is fine. Either one is fine. For practicing, this would practice an irregular verb. For practice, this would use a regular AR verb, preterite tense. You could also use fui a Canadá. Right? All those verbs kind of convey a very similar idea, express a similar idea, but they all do different things because ir happens to be irregular, hacer happens to be irregular, viajar happens to be perfectly regular. Viajé. ¿A dónde viajaste? Where did you travel? ¿A dónde viajaste? ¿A dónde viajó tu amigo? Where did your friend travel to? ¿Sí? ¿A dónde viajaron ustedes? Where did you guys travel to? Viajar, muy regular. It is a regular verb, and you just have to know it's a regular verb. Okay. Yeah, that's not very satisfying. Oh, you just know that's a regular verb. Do you know? You might get a tiny clue knowing that ir is irregular a lot, so it's probably irregular in preterite, but you don't know until you study it, until you see and hear a bunch of examples, and that's about it. Okay, did I answer that question okay for you? See?
Yeah, I'm just trying to connect to where you said that sometimes you just, you'll change the verb when you're answering, or what did you do? And this one looks like you could answer it either way.
Yes. Certain hacer is used with certain phrases where you keep hacer there, just hacer la cama means make the bed, right? Hacer un viaje means literally make a trip. We would say maybe more take a trip in English, right? Hacer la tarea means to do homework or to do a specific task. And those we'll just use hacer as hacer, right? But for other kinds of activities like wash windows, vacuum the floor, answer your phone, drink some coffee, you'll go to a different type of verb. Yeah, see? Okay, yeah. I'll review those slides and make sure I've got them phrased in such a way that it's not confusing. Okay, vale, perfecto. So you're going to prep the two new verbs, hacer and venir, and prep some ideas for using those so that you use it in the irregular form for preterito. And now we are up to 11:30. Guy, okay, bien. Bien, okay. ¿Vale?
Necesito mucho fino por comprender este tema.
Sí, necesitamos practicar con ejemplos. Sí, es natural.
Muy complicado.
Es muy complicado. Tienes razón. You are right. Sí, es muy complicado. No es nada fácil. It is not at all easy. No, nada. And you don't just look at it and now you suddenly have it all memorized. Eso no es así. It is not that way. You don't just look at it and now you remember it all. You have to, plug it into something of your own creation.
You just have to know is a tough grammar rule.
It's tough. We have to get used to, these are going to be oddball kind of verbs, but you will hear them in from time to time.
Wow.
So yeah,
So complicated.
It is complicated.
Me duele la cabeza.
Me duele la cabeza. Preterit is something that is very, very taxing because the imperfecto is such a regular type of tense. It has so few oddball forms, and the preterit is like complete opposite. It has tons of irregular forms, and typically if you're a high school student, they suddenly throw lots of them at you. I mean, I remember this was like ancient history. When I was first learning it, they would literally give you, here are the tables, go learn that and come back tomorrow and you better be able to use it. And, you'd have like 20 of these and it'd be like, ugh. And of course, bad taste in the mouth. No one likes that. But as time moved on, they finally said, you know what? This is not the way that people's brains work. You got to take a few at a time. So we'll take a few that kind of maybe are odd in a similar way. Yeah. And, the rule of thumb for a long, long time was to learn 2 or 3 oddball forms at a time and just practice them for a week. And when you break it down, it eventually gets a little bit better. But, it will still feel weird for quite a while. It will feel weird.
We don't have the same high school brain, though.
No, I'll be honest with you. A great big chart for the high school brain, that does not work either. That does not work. People don't learn it that way very, very well. The only way to really practice it is to see and hear a lot of examples, see and hear a lot of examples.
Yeah.
And that's why I give you a little story because, it's very difficult to just throw in, you will hear every once in a while a new example. Oh, they're using that verb. And you just have to notice it as you go along. So, eso es. Okay. Bien.
Sí.
Es poco natural. It is not natural. So if you feel that way, welcome to the club.
Thank you.
Bienvenida al club. Sí es difícil. Yes, it is hard. And it just takes a lot of time and a lot of exposure. So that's where we're at. Okay.